just necessary for one people to dissolve the political band and connect with them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and peaceful citizen which the Lord has made.
I was born a fighter, a scrappy little kid on a Brooklyn block. I bobbed and weaved my way through life as I stood up against the neighborhood bullies. I always hated bullies. There wasn't a dare I wouldn't take on. As I grew older, I learned from the streets. I had a knack for the ladies, a strong right arm, and a love for rock and roll. I opened the Chicago nightclub and booked big-name bands like the Grateful Dead, Led Zeppelin, and The Who. During the '68 convention in Chicago, I watched firsthand as the government raged out of control. I managed Bette Midler, founded the Manhattan Transfer, and was fortunate enough to win an Emmy, a Tony, and my films received 6 Academy Award nominations. I produced Trading Places, The Rose, and Wise Guys. But today, I am standing in front of the camera to fight for the rights of all Americans. Because today, I am frightened for the future of the country I love.
Ladies and gentlemen, mad as hell, Mr. Aaron Russo.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mad as Hell. I'm here tonight because I'm sick and tired of what's happening to my country. I'm fed up, and I feel an overwhelming need to shine a light on, to illuminate our country's problems. And the most fundamental problem we have in America is that it is no longer a free country. And it is fast becoming a totalitarian state. I know those are strong words, but they're true nonetheless. Let me illustrate. Imagine you're calmly driving along in your car, minding your own business, obeying all the traffic laws. And all of a sudden, in your rearview mirror, you see a police car coming up behind you. How does that make you feel? Safe and secure? Or uncomfortable? Let me see a show of hands for uncomfortable. Amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. See, I remember being taught in high school that America was different because it was founded on the principle of liberty. That means nobody can make you do things against your will, including the government. And government's function was to protect that liberty. Everybody, stand up. Stand up. I want you all to recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Stop. Sit down. And to the republic for which it stands. It doesn't say, and to the democracy for which it stands, and to the republic for which it stands. America was founded as a constitutional republic with some democratic principles. A republic is where 99% of the people can't take away the rights of 1%. And that's why America was called a free country. Your rights were guaranteed and absolute. Do you hear our elected representatives telling you our country is a republic? No! No! In a democracy, 51%, the majority, can take away the rights of 49%, the minority. That's not freedom. Who's ever in office determines what rights you have. Like a ping pong ball, bouncing back and forth, back and forth. One says abortion's legal. One says it's not. One says gun control. Another says no. Taxes are too high. Taxes are too low. Balance the budget in 7 years, 5 years, 9 years, 3 years, 1 year, 18 years. Affirmative action. No affirmative action. Speed limit 55, 75. It's safer. It's not safer. It's insanity. This creates a deep and dark division in America. Left versus right. Rich versus poor. Gender versus gender. That means man versus woman. What we need is a set of principles to live by, no matter who's in office. And we have it. It's here. It's called the Constitution. Restore it. Don't ignore it. People often ask me, Aaron, are you a liberal or a conservative? A Democrat or a Republican? Those are just labels. The right question is, Aaron, are you free? Are you free? No. Are you free? No. Are you free? No. Government is the problem, not the solution. A big centralized government, like ours has become, manipulates us into strict obedience in the name of some contrived greater good. Social engineering. That makes me want to puke. Because that's the big lie. That concept is the basis for the destruction of America. It is the antithesis of everything we stand for. There is no greater good than each of us being free. That is the ultimate good. Instead, we have federal agencies with massive police powers. They just gave the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms 13 ground attack jets, armed with Sidewinder missiles. What are they going to do? Go on airstrike on Fred's smoke shop? That's why my grandparents left Europe, to come here, to get away from governments who forced them into obedience. But now, here has become there. You have any music for me? Enough for that. Every election, politicians are sworn into office. They take an oath. They take an oath to defend the Constitution.
So help me God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
But after they swear to God, they dismiss their oath and ignore it. And ignore the Constitution. Why? You know why? Because the Constitution limits their powers over us. They don't want us free. They want us controlled, like puppets. Little marionettes, they string along and do this, do this, do this, do this. After the Oklahoma City bombing, the President and Congress called for the immediate passage of the anti-terrorist bill.
The time is now to enact this important legislation. You can be sure that terrorists around the world are not delaying their plans while we delay the passage of this bill.
It sounds great. Get rid of terrorism. Yeah. Yeah, on the surface. But scratch the surface of this bill, and we discover an overreaching power that is akin to dictatorship. 10-year sentences for the crime of supporting the lawful activities of an organization the president unilaterally, you hear that word? Unilaterally declares to be terrorist. And it's not appealable. He says it, that's it. Gets me so mad. In addition, this bill allows five hand-picked judges, hand-picked federal judges, to hold trials in secret. In secret! Behind closed doors. Wait. Without a jury. And the defendant isn't even present in his own trial to defend himself. You know why? Because he doesn't even know it's happening. Okay? He doesn't even know it's happening. That means you could be on trial right now and not even know it. And you were just found guilty. All of a sudden you're gone. All of a sudden people are going to start disappearing. They're whisked away. What happened to Sam Jones? I don't know. He was at work yesterday. Does this sound like liberty to you? No! This bill is about furthering totalitarianism, not stopping terrorism. Welcome to the new America! Yeah! Russo for president! If you take a frog and drop him into a pot of boiling water, he'll jump right out. But if you take that same frog and put him in a pot of cold water and slowly turn the heat up, He'll sit in that pot of water, lulled into complacency, until he boils to death. Ladies and gentlemen, we are that frog. And the water's beginning to boil. Did you hear we're being fitted for National ID card? Good. And it will be digitally encoded with the retina pattern of your eye or with your fingerprint? And every American will be required to carry one. Required is another word for forced. According to this bill, come 1999, all employers will be required to receive authorization from the federal government before hiring any new employee. The social planners are forcing you to get their permission before you can hire anybody. And your name has to be on their database to even get a job. Do you want your name on their database? No. They'll tell you from here to doomsday. They're defending your liberties. They're lying! Don't listen to what they say. But pay very close attention to what they do. Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Well, how many of you have been vigilant? Or do you do whatever the government dictates and just accept it? Freedom is something you have to fight for. It's not automatic. In the history of the world, America has come the closest to being a free country. Let's not blow it. Speaker of the House, Newt, blew it when he urged fellow members of the House of Representatives to destroy the Fourth Amendment by passing H.R. 666. Do you know this bill will allow the government to invade your home without a search warrant? Congress and the President have no authority to ignore the Constitution. But they're doing it. The major media never reported this. Why? Free press, please. It's a controlled press. And what they don't tell you is costing you your freedom. Music? Never mind. I'm on a roll. Why are you guys there anyway? I can't figure this out. Congress has passed the FBI wiretap bill. This requires that wiretaps be pre-built into all phone switching equipment by October 28, 1998. So that the Justice Department can listen in on any phone conversation in America, sitting in their office, pressing some buttons. Let's see what Aaron Russo's saying today. Sons of Then, the FBI asked for additional funding from Congress so they can tap into 1.5 million phones simultaneously. And when you tie that into H.R. 666, little nasty number there, they won't even need a court order. I think each of those freedom-loving members of Congress deserves a rectal adjustment. Now that's liberty! Almost everybody today is a criminal, according to the law. Let me explain. The federal code is over 1 million pages of fine print. It's been estimated that it would take 23,000 years to read. Okay? Yet, ignorance of the law is no excuse. We are responsible for all these laws. It's just a question of who and what law enforcement decides to focus on as to whether you go to jail, or you go to jail, or you go to jail. How does that make you feel? Well, if you're black, I guess you already know. I can't stand them. I mean, I can't stand them. Do you know there are more people in jail today in America than any other country in the world? And 70% of them are there for victimless crimes. How can you possibly have a crime if there isn't a victim? Idiots. They spent a fortune. They spent a fortune trying to put Heidi Fleiss in jail. And yet, at the same time, they let out a rapist who's victimized over 200 women. When they asked the rapist if he was going to rape again, he replied,
That is information that will come out in the wash eventually. You know, so right now the cards are still in the air.
well, thank God they got Heidi Fleiss off the streets. I feel so much safer. In goes Betty Crocker, out goes Jack the Ripper. It's insanity! It's insanity! In Washington, there are entire buildings that just hold books of rules and regulations. Big, big buildings full of bureaucrats whose job is making sure you and everyone else follow this endless stream of rules until we choke to death. put so much pressure on us that we have heart attacks and die. Wait, do you think this is the government's way of subsidizing the medical profession? But Dr. Kessler of the FDA wants to subsidize not only the medical profession, but the drug companies as well, by outlawing vitamins. He wants you to get a prescription just to buy vitamins. Heil Kessler! Oh, did I say that? It must have been a vitamin C deficiency. But nothing to worry about. I have Social Security. Can you believe what they've done to Social Security? I mean, can you believe it? From a voluntary retirement plan, it's evolved into another mandatory tax. Have you ever heard of a retirement plan where the money is not in your name? And the custodian can spend it at his will? And you can't leave it to your heirs? And it's their way of keeping track of you to boot. Try running a private fund like that. And then there's the IRS. It really sucks. I didn't know whether to say sucks or steals. They're both so appropriate. They tax you your whole life. And when you die, they tax you again on the money you leave your family. These people make pigs look anorexic. This is hard work. The San Francisco Chronicle reports by the year 2010, federal income tax and Social Security combined will take 84% of everything you earn. Now, I ask you a question. How can you raise a family if parents are supporting the government instead of their children? Of course morality is declining. Of course crime is soaring. How could it not? Repressed people strike back. And there are a whole lot of repressed people in America today. Do you feel repressed by the government? Yes! Let me see a show of hands. This country is just, it's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Have you heard about that? The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade? The so-called Free Trade Agreement? It's 22,000 pages. It weighs 365 pounds. That's a free trade agreement? One paragraph, we have free trade. No one, not even your congressman or your senators, read it. It would take 4 senators just to lift the thing. Jose, bring out Gat. Bring out Gat. Dump it. You okay, Jose? I don't want you to get hurt. I'm the star here, Jose. And 2 arch rivals running for president, Dole and Clinton, pushed everybody to sign it.
I'm pleased to announce that an understanding has been reached with Senator Dole. For the past 50 years, our country has led the world to create a more open and a more prosperous trading economy.
I will be writing a personal letter to each of my Republican colleagues in the Senate, enclosing all of this material, asking them to read it very carefully and suggesting that, in my view, we ought to be all in support of GATT when it comes up next week.
They don't know what it says. Do you understand the implications of that? It's time to wake up. And I'm here ringing the bell. Because nothing works. Healthcare, welfare, taxation, education, inflation, deflation, politicians lying, people dying, police state, subjugate, corruption, 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 corruption! Are you mad yet? Yeah. Let me hear I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Come on. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. We're mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore. Remember, fighting for freedom is an old American tradition. We will not be denied. Recently, the Associated Press reported the results of a national poll asking Americans if they trusted their government. 70% did not. One of the reasons this figure is so high is people are becoming more aware that we have all but lost our rights to due process and the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. A man's home is no longer his castle. Tonight's show is going to focus on asset forfeiture. Using that catchphrase, government agencies can lawfully storm your residence and seize all your assets. That includes your home and your bank accounts. Last year there were over 250,000 asset forfeitures. That's 5,000 every week. And 80% of those victims were never charged with a crime, much less proven guilty of anything. And in some cases, people were even killed in the process.
Captain DeWitt here.
Yeah.
I'm on a search warrant with the Hidden Hills crew on this marijuana eradication thing.
Yes.
And they just, looks like 927D here.
At the location?
Yeah.
Somebody there?
No, we put him down.
We killed him?
Yeah.
It's scary, you know. I never, ever would have thought that I would witness my husband executed, literally executed, third world country style.
Donald Scott died in his living room on October 2nd, 1992, gunned down by police. Now, his widow says that Donald was the victim of a law that makes the seizure of private land so financially attractive to law enforcement agencies that they have begun to assume private citizens guilty till proven innocent.
The story begins here at Trails End Ranch, 200 acres in Malibu, California. Current value, $5 million. Landowner Donald Scott was a multi-millionaire due to a family inheritance. He was handsome, prosperous, and married to Frances Plant, a woman half his age. But their passion for each other blinded them to age differences.
I would tell him he's 61 going on 16. He had so much energy, and he was just so much fun to be around. We had the best time. We just had a ball. I don't think any two people have ever been happier.
But their idyllic life at Trails End soon became a Gothic nightmare.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to Rancho Sierra Vista Sat We on behalf of the National Park Service.
In the 30 years since Donald Scott purchased his ranch, the National Park Service had bought up every available land parcel surrounding Trails End, making Scott's land a choice morsel for federal acquisition. The Park Service judged Trails End crucial to complete its federal land acquisitions agenda. Friends say that the Park Service had approached Donald repeatedly about selling, but he refused.
Donald always had a feeling that the government would do something, or the national park wanted this land to the point of where they would do anything to get this land, even kill him.
Ironically, Scott predicted his own death, but it was not by the Park Service. 2 years ago, the L.A. County Sheriff's Department claimed they had received an anonymous tip about Trails End Ranch. Captain Larry Waldy ran the narcotics unit at the time.
We then got a tip from a reliable informant that, in fact, that marijuana, large amounts of marijuana were growing there.
It was 1993. L.A. County was in fiscal crisis. Law enforcement budgets were scant, and like other agencies, the Sheriff's Department was scrambling for extra funds. More and more, they were forced to rely on the proceeds of drug busts to supplement crippled budgets. In effect, our civil servants became revenue producers.
Discovering drugs on private land allows a law enforcement agency to seize the property, sell it, and take the profits. That is called asset forfeiture. It is highly controversial in that it gives an incentive to law enforcement agencies to say that drugs exist, to pretend that drugs exist, even when there aren't any.
Financially motivated to confirm the anonymous tip, Deputy Sheriff Gary Spencer ordered aerial reconnaissance, and DEA agent Charles Stowell complied. In a fly over the ranch, he claimed he saw 50 marijuana plants attached to lines suspended from tree branches.
There is virtually no way that Stowell could have seen through that canopy of trees. It's like a rainforest. It's impenetrable.
Michael Bradbury is district attorney for Ventura County. His investigators studied the Scott case for months. Their findings were explosive, concluding the L.A. Sheriff's Department was motivated in part to seize the ranch for the government.
I think Agent Stowell was under tremendous pressure from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office in the person of Deputy Spencer to come up with the opinion that marijuana was being cultivated on the ranch. As a matter of fact, after Stowell initially said that he had seen marijuana, he called Spencer back and said, "I am not comfortable with you using my name, and you have to corroborate me."
Despite Agent Stowell's reservations, the Sheriff's Department marshaled ground teams from the National Park Service and the Border Patrol. But even their ground surveillance turned up no marijuana. Nevertheless, law enforcement still commandeered a search warrant and ordered the troops to move in.
27 people were at the scene. There were at least 5 different agencies. You had the National Park Service there because we worked with them in dealing with the marijuana eradication program. LAPD was there and DEA was there. Coupled with that is the National Guard that we work with.
There was a crash and the house started shaking. And when I first realized it wasn't an earthquake, and I saw a man's face looking at me through the window. Here these men come running towards me, and I'm backing into my living room, screaming, "Don't shoot me, don't kill me." My husband heard me, and he came out into the living room screaming, "Francis, are you all right?" And he had his gun pointed up in the air, and he looked at me, and they yelled, "Put your gun down, put your gun down, put your gun down." And that was the last thing he said, and they just murdered him. This picture of these men was taken moments after they killed him by their own sheriff's department, and they're smiling like, I don't know what.
The troops searched the entire property, including a grove of trees where the 50 marijuana plants were allegedly spotted by aerial reconnaissance. And there was no marijuana.
But we found some lines suggesting the block and tackle method on some of the trees in that general vicinity.
There's no evidence that there were ropes and lines there.
I will never be able to be convinced they came here to serve a search warrant.
So why did 5 government agencies storm the house that morning? Was the raid on Donald Scott's property part of a government conspiracy to obtain his land for the Park Service under asset forfeiture laws? Does that sound too far-fetched to you? Not if you consider the findings of the DA's office.
Curiously, the district attorney's investigation yielded these documents. They were passed out during a briefing before the raid. A property appraisal of the 200-acre ranch and a map, including a notation by Agent Stowell that a neighboring 80-acre parcel had recently sold for $800,000. The district attorney doesn't understand why a search for drugs would include such information unless seizing Scott's land was law enforcement's motive.
I think this is simply a case of a good officer, very aggressive, who lost his moral compass, saw an opportunity to have his star rise rapidly in the department by seizing a significant asset.
In fact, current Park Service land acquisition policies across the United States are under scrutiny, considered heavy-handed, and in some cases illegal. As for Donald's murder, Frances insists that her husband was in the process of lowering his gun when he was shot.
It was just pointed up in the air. He didn't have a chance to obey their deadly command of put your gun down anyway. They just blew him away.
And Frances's nightmare just kept getting worse. Months after Donald's murder, the ranch house burned down. Frances says it may have been arson.
The house is burned down because the national park, again, the national park refused to let the Ventura Fire Department put out the fire. They could have made a very simple fire break. They had all their equipment there just to make one little fire break, and the national park stopped them. They said it is against our park policy to disturb the natural beauty of our park land. And now, guess what? Now the IRS wants to force a sale of this land to make us pay death taxes.
So let me get this right. One agency of the government comes in and kills your husband, and now that he's dead, another agency of the government comes in and wants the land.
Well, they haven't met me yet. They're not going to get this land. I couldn't believe this could happen in our country. I couldn't believe my father has fought in 2 wars for us to be safe in our homes. And for this to happen in America it's unbelievable.
That piece was absolutely frightening. And the fact that the 2 deputies who shot Donald Scott are still in service only goes to prove the point that the government is unaccountable. We are very fortunate to have with us on today's show three of America's foremost experts on asset forfeiture. Brenda Grantland is a graduate of George Washington University's law school. She presently serves on the board of directors of FEAR, Forfeiture Endangers American Rights. And Jeffrey Steinborn is a graduate of Yale Law School and a prominent Seattle attorney who specializes in asset forfeitures. Judy Osborne is a hooker from Santa Monica Boulevard. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. A little.
You have your asset seized for that.
Have your asset seized for that, too. There you go. Judy Osborne is the author of Spectre of Forfeiture. She defeated the government's attempted forfeiture of her home and now edits the FEAR Chronicles. Is what happened to Donald Scott a rare occurrence?
Many of the things that happen to Donald Scott happen every day. There are people that are getting killed because of the war on drugs and because police want to seize their house. There are many instances where the police lie to obtain a search warrant. And there are many times when the raids are made on places where no crime is being committed.
Mm-hmm. So how does civil forfeiture differ from criminal prosecution?
It's so easy to forfeit something civilly. All they have to do is say that we want it and come and get it. And at that point it becomes your burden, you the property owner's burden, to hire an attorney if you can find one who understands the law and to go there and prove that the government doesn't have a right to your property. So it's enormously different. Really all the government has to do is wish for it and it's theirs until you can go try to get it back, which is very difficult.
Wait, are you saying to me that under civil forfeiture the government doesn't have to prove anything?
No.
There's no due process of law?
No, that's correct. That's what I'm saying.
So
they can seize your property based on hearsay, and hearsay is really nothing more than a police officer standing in front of a judge and swearing to something for which he's not accountable. And that's enough to get the papers to seize your house. Then you have to go back to court and try to prove that your house or your property is not tainted by some unlawful conduct.
So how does do the police or the authorities decide whether a case is civil or criminal?
Well, I think nowadays they have to think more seriously about criminal because of some new developments in the law. But up until about a year ago, the courts had ruled that civil forfeiture of your property was not punishment, and therefore the government didn't have to follow the usual rules that they have to follow when they try to punish you for committing a crime.
So if the authorities have the option of saying this is criminal or civil, they can always say it's civil because it's easier for them to take it.
Absolutely easier. And that's what they do, and that's why for the last 10 years the government civil forfeiture program has really been running amok. What you have here is the government, well, the looters are in the wheelhouse, and they're using the government as a way to loot the country. And the result of it is that the police in situations like this really run around like children without adult supervision, taking what they want. In about 90% of the cases, there is no recourse. The property's gone, and whatever rights may have been violated along the way are simply ignored. Fortunately, assassinations are rare, but they're certainly not unheard of, and I'm sure we haven't seen the last of them.
So they can, if they want to, they can just come in and say that they can just plant evidence and say...
They can do that too, but they don't have to. They don't need evidence.
They don't need evidence.
They need a cop. We all know how honest cops are. They need a cop who's ready to swear that somebody reliable told him or her that there's pot in your house or that you sold some drugs or committed some crime and that the fruits of that crime are invested into your real estate or in your bank account.
So if some informant says Aaron Russo is growing marijuana in his backyard and the cops come and raid my house, they can seize my home, my bank accounts, based on the fact that some informant said that.
That's correct.
An informant who stands to gain 25% of your seized assets.
Whoa! Wait a minute. No! You mean the informant gets a piece of this action?
Yes, either in reduced jail time in some cases, but most often up to 25% of the forfeited assets. It's right there in the statute. It's right there in the statute, yes.
So I'm going to call up on everybody in here. Hey! This one. Let's seize their house. I'm getting 25% of that.
And it places
is
the owner in the
disgusting.
untenable situation of trying to prove a negative. I challenge anybody here to prove there was no marijuana in your closet on this day 2 years ago. Prove it.
That's the scary part about it, and what's happened. You know, Aaron, we've been talking about the Constitution, but this demonstrates very clearly the Constitution is what the judges say it is. And if the judges say this is constitutional, then it is. And so one of the problems really is that the judges, we have to have some judges who have the courage to talk about what your rights are and to be offended by this.
But the Constitution is very plain English. It's not very difficult to understand.
Well, you would think so, but historically it's always been nothing more than what the judges say it is. And this generation of judges seems to have a low esteem for some of these rights that we hold so dear.
So who's vulnerable to forfeiture? Like
Everyone.
Anybody.
You know, there are lots of cases now where third parties are having their assets seized because of something someone else did. Say a landlord-tenant situation, for example. You may own an apartment building and someone living in your apartment may be selling drugs. The police will come to you and say, get that tenant out of there within 2 weeks or we'll take your property. And you go to your lawyer, you find out that the local landlord-tenant law requires you to give your tenant due process. So you start going through the due process that you're required to give under the local landlord-tenant law, and that's not fast enough. They come in and seize your property. There's a couple in Southern California, retired Army, I forget his office. He was an officer, and this was his retirement property, and he lost his entire rental property because he couldn't get the tenant out fast enough to please the cops.
If you're a landlord, the situation's even more frightening than that because they can search your rental property illegally. Just kick the door down without a warrant. And if they find something growing there, then they can seize the house. And you, the owner, the landlord, don't have the right to object to the illegal search because you weren't living there. I just had a case like that last week, yes? And they are not embarrassed to stand up in court and say, yes, we're going to take his house, and he has no right to complain that we kicked the door down without a warrant because he wasn't living there at the time.
In fact, reporting your suspicions of your tenant's illegal activities to the police is cause enough to have your house forfeited because that puts on the record that you knew that there was something illegal going on.
Right. So
you can't show your innocence.
So you're in a catch-22 situation. Yeah. So how does an ordinary citizen protect themselves?
You try to get the laws changed.
Right now, everybody is vulnerable. You can have your assets forfeited for making an incorrect statement on a loan application. Fish and Wildlife not long ago seized a tractor under EPA laws because it ran over an endangered rat. It didn't help the rat.
I heard about that. The Vietnamese farmer was tilling his land with his tractor. He ran over a kangaroo rat, and the government came and took his tractor. They tried to put him in jail for 2 years for running over a kangaroo rat. This is unbelievable. Do you know why I'm so mad? Do you understand what's going on here, guys? I mean, this is sickening. And it's our country.
If you are a member of a corporation and one individual in that corporation is indicted for instance, a money laundering operation, the government has a theory of tainted money, where his tainted money contaminates all your good money like a drop of ink in a glass of water. And so, therefore, the whole corporation's assets can be forfeited based upon the alleged illegal activity of one member.
What is this about legal fiction, that property has no rights so they can take it? How does that work? Can somebody tell me?
This is a very old concept that goes back to biblical times, basically. If an object, it's called deodond, if an object is used to kill a man, then like a sword is used to kill a man, then they would say, well, that sword was guilty and we're going to take it away from the owner and destroy it. And the owner's rights in it disappear. And they're using that fiction. It's a lie. A fiction is a lie.
But as an example, I heard about a man who lost his airplane because he said the airplane had no rights. It doesn't matter if the man owned the airplane. He said the airplane has no civil rights, so we can just take it. Or we can take his car, or we can take the money, because property has no rights, ignoring the fact that people who own the property have the rights of ownership. Right. That's the legal fiction, am I correct?
Right.
Explain to me about the 30 days, how that works. That you have 30 days to argue against the seizure, and if you don't do it within 30 days, then you can't get it back?
There's a very important part about that I think that you're overlooking. When they take your property, they could hold it for a long, long time and then send a notice out when you happen to be on vacation or whatever. You've got 20 days not only to file a claim, but to pay a cost bond of 10% of the value of the property in order to even fight to get it back. So in order to get a hearing, you've got to pay for it in advance.
But if they just took everything you own, how can you pay for anything?
Well, you're indigent, and of course you can't hire a lawyer, but because it's a civil case, you are not appointed a counsel.
So you have no money left to hire a lawyer. Correct. They don't give you a court-appointed lawyer, so you can't even fight back in the time allotted.
And the law is so complicated that the majority, I would say, of lawyers don't even know how to fight civil forfeiture.
This is unbelievable.
So people can't fight it themselves.
And which federal agencies have the power to do this?
Most of them. And that's the reason that most forfeitures, people abandon or give up their property or lose their property without ever going to court, without ever getting a day in court. They just lose it.
And though the precedents were set by drug laws, there are over 200 federal forfeiture statutes, and many of them don't even contain the exemption for innocent owners that the drug laws contain.
Where does the money go when they take it all?
The police get to keep it.
Whoa! Whoa! Wait a minute.
Not only
some guy calls up and says, hey, Russo over there is doing something wrong. He's sleeping with his wife or something. Okay? Sex is not allowed here anymore. Okay? And then they come and raid your house. They take all your assets, right? And then they get to keep them. Now, a few days ago, something shocking came across my desk. A new bill, H.R. 1617, the Career Planning Act. Whew. And it's already been passed by both the House and the Senate. It's in committee now, waiting to go to President Clinton for his signature. Carolyn Steinke knows a lot about it. She's the executive director of Parents Involved in Education, and the facts she'll give you will prove that George Orwell's 1984 is only 12 years late. Carolyn, please be the first one to vent.
Children in this nation, as a matter of fact, in our wonderful United States, are scoring lower than third world nations when it comes to getting an academic education.
But we know that problem. Tell us about H.R. 1617.
H.R. 1617 came to light when we realized that there was a plan. The reason why they are dumbing down our children is the Clintons' plan for human resource development. It is a plan in which the government has decided to join in a partnership with parents in the raising of their children.
Parents and the government are going to be a partnership?
Yes, 50% arrangement until a child, of course, has been designated at risk. Now, they call the plan cradle to grave. Cradle to grave, meaning that from the I call it sperm to worm. When the federal government finds out a child is conceived, that is the moment for assessing the parent. And from that time on, every child will be assessed, and they will be qualified, and they will be scrutinized. And if for any reason, according to the plan, these children are not meeting the criteria that the federal government has set for their well-being, which could be anything, we have that also, the at-risk designations could be anybody's child. The child of an obese parent, the child that has too few toys or too many toys, a child that was a low birth weight, 6 pounds. Do you know what that brings? That brings with it the federal government looking into your home unannounced 8 to 10 visits a year to monitor.
What does that mean? They can just come knock on your door and walk in the house?
Absolutely. If your child has been designated at risk.
And who designates them at risk?
If they fall into the criteria, whoever is the case manager, the social worker, the person...
No!
Absolutely.
No!
Now, that's what we've been finding out. But then we take it a step further and we find out why. Why? Because this whole society is in the process of being recultured. And they say the reason for the Careers Act is that we need to change our labor force because it's so dumbed down, that we have to be able to be competitive in the new world. In the global market, we need global workers. Well, I'm telling you right now, Aaron, with the way this country is hemorrhaging and our manufacturing is going to other countries, the only way this human resource development, human beings who go to get a job are going to be competitive in a third world market is if they're going to work for 1/42nd of the normal wage. Now, the governing board at the federal level sets up a national plan for workforce development, a national employment agency, where all frontline jobs, public and private, must be reported. And all vacancies and anyone looking for work must report to the National Employment Agency.
So does that tie into the Feinstein bill with the Immigration Act that we have to go?
That's it in a nutshell. That's it. Now, they're totally radically restructuring education. And the plan, the legislation calls for integrating career-based curriculum at the earliest grades possible. Little kindergartners are now going to start talking about careers, and now they're going to start being investigated, analyzed, and surveyed as to what is their best potential for their future. And Aaron, guess what? Your children and my children and the children in this audience are going to now be picking their career for life and being trained specifically for that career by the 9th grade.
Not my children. Not my children.
Does this sound a little bit like the hammer and the sickle?
Well, I think, Carolyn, I thank you for coming here and telling us all this. I think Carolyn deserves a big round of applause. You know, no matter how deep I get into what's going on in America, I'm still amazed by the things I'm learning. And that's why I decided to do this show, so that we can all learn something together to stop this vulgarity and this deceit by our government. You know, this podium is your platform. So anybody else who wants to vent, please raise your hand. Please. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Aaron. I'm Julian Whitaker, and I'm a medical doctor. I've been practicing in the state of California for about 20 years. Been very active in medical freedom. I practice what you call alternative medicine, which I don't call alternative medicine. I just call good medicine, because we use vitamins and minerals and things of this nature. I've been following the FDA. I've been involved in several lawsuits against the FDA with vitamins and minerals. However, there's something going on in Houston, Texas right now, which amounts to a cultural rape. There's a physician there by the name of Stanislaus Brzezinski. And I've been hearing about Stanislaus Brzezinski treating cancer. Basically, he has found a definite method and cure for cancer by isolating naturally occurring particles from the blood that get into the cell and turn off the genetic activity that causes cancer to progress. I have visited his clinic on 2 occasions. I've gone over terminal brain cancer patients that never, ever regress or never go into remission. They go into complete remission. There's a case in San Francisco of a 4-year-old girl who had a rhabdoid tumor of the brain, the most deadly tumor in childhood, 52 cases reported, average lifespan is 8 months. She lived 2.5 years, and she died not from cancer, but from the radiation and chemotherapy she had before she had this therapy. Now, I've talked to leukemia patients and lymphoma patients, complete remission. And it makes sense. Now, let me finish this. It makes sense because these particles go in and activate or deactivate the tumor or suppressor genes and the oncogenes. It requires a paradigm shift in cancer. Now, why I'm here is this. In 1983, the American Cancer Society put this on an unproven blacklist. 2 months later, the FDA filed suit in federal court in Houston in 1983 to put Stanislaus Brzezinski out of business and to destroy his discovery.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why is it in their interest to stop a cancer cure? Why is this happening in your mind?
Whenever there is a true discovery in any culture that requires a shift of paradigms, the paradigm we have in cancer now is you cut, burn out. This paradigm is you stop it at the genetic level. You don't have to cut. You don't have to burn. All of that, the billions of dollars of industry, goes down the drain. So there's three areas of resistance to this. There's the government, which is illegalizing it. There is the oncologists, which are hot and bothered because he represents a challenge to their belief system. And then there's the insurance company, which basically is governed by the physicians.
Would it be possible to bring Doctor to the show here one day?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to vent? Senator Rogers.
Thank you, Aaron. And I'm mad. Let me tell you why.
Please.
I'm mad because the federal government has literally turned their back on not only California, but all the border states. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. Every night, several thousand people enter into our state illegally. They break our law. They're illegal aliens. They come across the border almost unrestricted. 80% of every newborn child in Los Angeles County is born of an illegal alien parent. And the California taxpayer is picking up the tab. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm mad because the voters, Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution, and I wish some of the federal judges would read it once in a while.
That's a far...
I guess so. It says clearly, it clearly says that the federal government is charged with the responsibility of protecting the individual states from invasion. We are being invaded. California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Florida, literally being invaded by people who break our law and come into our state illegally. Now, 15 months ago, the people in this state voted, 59% voted for a proposition called 187. A federal judge, one judge appointed by Jimmy Carter, has put a stop to what the people in California clearly support.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, what we need to do is, of course, I'm thinking maybe we ought to put a term limit on federal judges, folks, rather than lifetime. It is not fair to the people in California. What's happening? We are required, according to this federal judge, to provide free welfare services, free medical care, and a free public education to all of these people that come in and break our law and come into the state illegally. And it's time that we told the federal government, look, you either do it or we're going to do it.
Amen.
Now, the federal judge, let me tell you how contorted her reasoning was in using the Constitution. She said, well, Prop 187, you are making immigration law, and that is the area for the federal government. That's not what 187 was about. 187 was merely saying the state of California has the right to remove the incentives that are acting like a magnet that are drawing these people into our state. That's all 187 does.
Right.
It doesn't monkey with immigration law. So it's time that we put a stop to it, that we reaffirm the sovereignty of the state of California, and we do what we know we have to do to spare and preserve and rescue the taxpayers in this state. I'm mad.
Who else would like to vent? Gosh, a lot of us. I don't know if we can go with as many people. You know, how about you, Senator Duke? You have anything for us? Please introduce yourself.
Okay, well, I'm Charles Duke, state senator from the state of Colorado. And I'm very happy to be here today, Aaron, and I'm mad as well, like many of the people here.
Are you mad as well or mad as hell?
Mad as well. I'm mad about the loss of our Constitution, as you well know, and I'm mad about a $5 trillion debt, and Just a number of things, not to mention the property seizure law that you've talked about tonight. That's really one of the many reasons that I carried the nation's first 10th Amendment resolution. And that resolution restores to the states the power that I believe rightfully belonged to them all along, but has been stolen from us by this rogue Congress. Now, that resolution had two parts. It said, first, the state of Colorado hereby claims sovereignty over all powers not otherwise enumerated and granted to the federal government by the United States Constitution. It's based on the 10th Amendment, which says the states have any power they wish to have, unless it's prohibited. The second part reminded the federal government that they're our agent, and it says that the federal government, as our agent, is hereby given notice and demand to cease and desist, effective immediately, mandates that are beyond the scope of the constitutionally delegated powers. Colorado wasn't asking the federal government for anything. We were telling them the way it is. Now, I was a little unprepared for what happened after I did that. I really kind of did it initially, not only to support the Constitution, but primarily for fun. Well, it really took off across the nation, and in fact, Senator Rogers sponsored SDR 44 here in California, and that has passed as well. To date, we have 21 states that have passed that 10th Amendment resolution.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Now, some have said, where are you going with this, Charlie? What exactly are you trying to achieve? And I said, well, let's suppose we get 38 states to adopt the 10th Amendment resolution, and we call a meeting of those 38 states, and we draft some orders for Congress. And we hand it to the Congress, and we say, here are your orders. You are our agent. You have 90 days. And they'll say, or what? And we will say, or your services are terminated. And there will be new elections to replace you. Now, there are good things happening in our government, some of them at the state legislative level, even one at the national federal level. Because in Montana there was a bill, didn't pass, but I'm sure it'll be introduced again, to require any federal agent to register with the local sheriff. You might be very surprised to know that the Supreme Court has ruled on more than one occasion that the federal government has no police power.
Right.
So they can't go to the federal government for help there. In any case, I'll be introducing that in Colorado. And Senator Rogers has told me if I'll get the data to him, he'll introduce it for the state of California.
Yes!
There really is a revolution underway in this country. It's not the one Newt Gingrich thinks it is. It's in the minds of the people, and we are going to reclaim this government. I think the framers of our Constitution properly did understand what 1996 was about. The challenge for us is to understand what 1776 was about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's a remarkable friend of mine who I love dearly and who's given a lot of thought to the subjects we've been speaking about tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please, Rod Taylor.
I'm here to talk to you about the problem of slavery. It didn't end in the 1860s. It's a social malady that's with us today, and it's increasing in its scope and virulence. The desire to enslave our fellow man is unfortunately intrinsic to the human character. It has been with us since the beginning of time, on every continent and in virtually every culture, from ancient Egypt to Babylon to Greece and Rome, Africa, Asia, Europe, and the United States. Germany and Japan openly practiced widespread slavery only 50 years ago, and the Soviet Union until less than a decade ago. China even today. It's a disease of our human nature, and yet people are under the impression that it no longer exists. I say to you that in a subtle form it exists in America today, and it's becoming less subtle and more manifest. Madison Avenue has just cleaned it up a little bit, dressed it up in new words. The slave master is now Big Brother, someone to protect you, someone to confide in. But it's all the same. He owns your life. This may sound far-fetched, but I think I can prove it. When the IRS allows you a tax deduction, they and their congressional collaborators and the media call it a tax subsidy. In other words, they designate it as a gift to you, a subsidy. The only way they could conceive this terminology is by presupposing that they, i.e. the government, own all the money. Their view is that they're entitled to it all. That which they allow you to keep is their compassionate and generous gift to you. How can this be? You create the money by your efforts, your sacrifice, your creativity, your risk-taking. So how can it belong to them? It's very simple. They own you. They own everything you produce, your money, your house, your thoughts and ideas, your children. If you go to a foreign country to work, you still have to pay the U.S. income tax. You could dig a hole in the middle of Siberia and they'd be entitled to a cut of your wages because in their minds, under their law, they own you. They create arcane and esoteric laws to criminalize you. You may try, but you can't obey them. You can't even understand them without a lot of professional help. You have to run around slavishly collecting little pieces of paper, receipts, 7 years of detailed financial records because you might be called on to give an account of yourself to the big boss man. And if you've made a mistake, he can take everything you have. He loves it that way. That's total power over you, slavery. I don't remember when we, the people, signed over ownership of ourselves. It just gradually happened by them taking more and more of our freedom. But here's the worst part. It's really only just begun. In this modern age, the information age, getting your money is not enough, even though money, don't let anyone deceive you, is the material source of your freedom. Now, however, they want your mind. If you deviate in your thinking, if you commit one of the 10,000 taboos, and they perceive your actions as a threat, they'll come out and kill you. It was the thought police who killed the children at Waco and Ruby Ridge. Neither David Koresh nor Randy Weaver, whatever things might be said about them, had ever mugged anyone, robbed a 7-Eleven, or committed forcible rape or murder. But they did have unorthodox views, and therefore it was necessary to round them up and deal with them. Whatever their crimes were, they could have been arrested and tried openly in a court of law. But that was not the aim of certain factions in the government. These statists wanted a massive demonstration of force to show who was boss. The penalty for resisting is death. After all, we're not free. We belong to the government, and deviant thoughts will not be tolerated. In the aftermath of the horrible Oklahoma City bombing, government propagandists tried to intimidate the people into silence by recklessly linking criticism of the government to acts of murder. Some people ask, how can you fear your government and claim to love your country? Our response is, how can you love your country without fearing your government? Who else holds a counterfeit license to kill, incarcerate, and confiscate for non-crimes? Remember, America is about liberty first and last, not obedience to bureaucrats. The Washington power clique wants you to shut up, get in line, do what you're told to do, and most outrageously, think what you've been told to think. We have hundreds of politicians and thousands of lobbyists crawling all over Washington, thinking of ways to control you, to extend their will over you, to subvert your freedom and replace it with their will, to capture, that is, to steal your life force. And so we should all be very angry, because anger is the engine that drives our will to resist. And without resistance, without awareness, they will take it all. That's not just politically perverse. It's a sin against mankind, because freedom is actually sacred. Drop an ant into a jar and seal the lid. It will spend the rest of its life trying to get out. It has nowhere to go, but it wants to be free. That is its nature. It's the way every living thing is made. Once, a long time ago, I saw something at the zoo, a wolf lying in its cage. I thought about how this magnificent animal is the end product of millions of years of evolutionary design. A nose that could detect the faintest scent, ultrasonic hearing, eyes that could see in the dark, teeth and jaws capable of crushing thick bone, heart and lungs that could run him for hours in a sub-zero blizzard. And yet there he was, lying forlorn and full of despair. He was well fed. He had a clean habitat and water and medical care. So what was the problem? He was sick with the knowledge that his wonderful powers would never be exercised again. And so he lay there, his head on his paws, staring blankly ahead at perhaps some imaginary forest that he could never reach because there were bars around him. They had not killed his body, but they were destroying his soul. God gave Adam and Eve freedom, even though he knew they would invite death into the world. That's how important freedom is in the divine scheme of things. And that's why we urge you to defend it always.
I've often wondered what George Washington, Sam Adams, and Thomas Jefferson would do if they were alive today. Not much. They would have been in jail. You know, a lot of intelligent people warned me not to do this show. Said I was putting myself in danger. But that's precisely why I'm here today. I refuse to live in fear of my government. We have to take personal responsibility for our lives. They think of us as statistics. They lump us together in groups. 65% of the blacks think like this. 75% of the women think like that. 27% of the Jews think this way. And 61% of the Christians think that way. 50% of the men think this way, and out of that 50%, 46% of the circumcised ones think another way. It's all bull. There are no groups. We're individuals. Group thinking is no thinking. It's black against white, rich over poor, straight opposing gay, men versus women, rancher against rapper. It's only as individuals that we will ever find harmony and peace. Bill Clinton and I are both white, straight, male Americans. That's 4 groups we share. But do I think like Bill Clinton? I can't stand Bill Clinton. I am Aaron Russo before I'm white, before I'm Jewish, before I'm an American. I can't think like all Jews, or all white people, or all Americans. It's not possible. Divide and conquer. It's an old formula. Folks, we've been splintered. My hope is, God, I pray, my hope is that this show, this series, can bring all these splinters together into a strong oak tree that can withstand the assaults that we're under. So we can once again make our common thread freedom of the individual. So we can all be different and still defend each other's rights and appreciate our differences. That's what it's all about. And if you don't allow freedom, if any of you don't allow freedom for somebody else, then you can't have freedom. Do you understand that? We don't have much time, folks. The free America that we all knew and loved may be gone forever. That's frightening. That's damn frightening. It's time for all of us to stand up and say, no matter what my gender, my race, my age, my education, or economic level, rich or poor, I am first a human being. And I'm ready to start behaving like one again. I open up my arms and my heart and respect every other person in this country. No more labels to separate us. No more judging each other. Live and let live. We are going to reclaim America's ideals of brotherhood and liberty for everyone. That's our greatest legacy. I want all of you who feel as I do to send me letters and faxes. Email me. Tell your friends to join us in this crusade for freedom. This will be the largest crusade in the history of America, and a direct challenge to the status quo. And Washington damn well knows it. Make them understand that we, the people, are the sovereigns, not them. We love you, Ed. Come on, everybody. America.
Remember. A new American revolution has begun. Not against the forces of a colonial kingdom, but a rebellion against an oppressor that has risen above